So what happens in my mind is, okay, well, that means other people's opinions are more important than my own. Ergo, other people are more important than me. And as a result of this, I played the part of a good girl. So I didn't just get A's, I got A pluses. I got scholarships. I wasn't on the volleyball team. I was captain of the volleyball team. And then this started spilling out later into my relationships because I had to marry I had to date someone that was important enough. So you got to marry a doctor. You got to marry a lawyer. I mean, that was a joke. And the Jewish side of my family is like, Neil, do we know a doctor? Oh, yes, we know a doctor. He's a nephrologist. Oh, he went to Harvard. He's got great teeth. Great teeth. You should go out for coffee with him. Good boy. True story. True story. So at the end of the day, you might think, oh, what's the big deal? Like, we're achieving, we're dating someone of status. What's the big deal? But we're not looking at achievement rationally. We're looking at achievement through the lens of a high achieving people pleaser. And the reason why we achieve is because we want to feel important. But the problem is, we don't want to achieve too much because then it's like sticking your head out and people might think you're arrogant. So the conflict in our head, if you just sort of drill down to the root cause, it's really, we're worried about coming across as egotistical, as arrogant. And the problem with that is egotism and arrogance is selfish. And selfish is a bad thing. And we also learned that during childhood. You need to share your toys. You've already answered the question. Let someone else go first. So the question is, how do we fix this? Well, here's the irony. To fix it, we need to be a little bit more selfish. And here's why. Don't be afraid of rabbit holes. Now you're probably thinking, what do rabbit holes have to do with feeling like an imposter? Have you ever been to a networking event? What's the second question they usually ask after asking your name? What do you do for a living, right? I noticed, that you have a doctor in your name. And I said, well, I have a PhD in endocrinology, yada, yada, yada. And they said, oh, so you're not a real doctor. Resting bitch face is all I'm going to say. Now, if it's a really great day, they're going to ask me the second question, which is, oh, so what you do now is like motivational speaking, but your doctorate was in like diabetes and stuff. Like, so I don't get it. And that's when I really feel like an imposter because my mind goes, oh, actually, I don't know what I'm doing. All the experts have been like focusing and studying on one subject for 5, 10, 50 years. I started off as a pastry chef, then I opened up a restaurant and catering business. I went bankrupt for $250,000. The only thing I could do was go back to school. Not doing that again. So then I went back to school. And I was like, not going to do that again. So I went back into real estate, being a PA. I was like, this sucks. So I went back to my PhD. And then I went into weight loss, then I went into body image issues, and now I'm in tech, and now I'm a motivational speaker. Yet clearly, I'm an imposter still, right? Because everyone else around me has focused in on that field for decades and decades. Put yourself into situations where you actually do feel like an imposter. Because let me tell you, the only way to become more confident is to get yourself uncomfortable. But if I had a wish for you to take away one single concept, it would be this. Self-respect is simply knowing that you're important, no matter who hurt you in the past or how much you still hurt. Because when you know this and believe this and envelop this, you extend that same grace to others. You start looking differently at the person sitting next to you on the bus or that colleague that always seems to be in a bad mood, or that family member that seems to disagree with everything that you have to say. Through the lens of self-respect, you start looking at people for who they are, not who you think they are. And that to me is what a revolution is all about. A revolution is defined as a dramatic and wide-reaching change of conditions. And when I think about the world right now, and the world that we're building for the next generation, and how much disrespect we show to each other, because of the pain and shame that we all feel. It's time, now more than ever, for that dramatic and wide-reaching change of conditions. And that's what the self-respect revolution is all about. Changing the relationship that we have with ourselves so we can change the relationship that we have with each other. So we can build a world where self-respect is valued, nurtured, prioritized, and even celebrated. A world where everyone knows that they're important. Thank you. And you might be thinking rationally, well, that's so obvious. Of course you're going to make choices that support your career. Of course you're going to make choices to accelerate your leadership potential. But that's not as obvious through the lens of a high-achieving people pleaser, because remember, we are achieving for the goal of feeling important, to get that validation, but also not to ruffle feathers and keep everyone happy. So when we make decisions, it's just not an on and off switch. We think it's like a 7-Eleven. We have to press all the buttons before we make that decision, rather than just saying, well, we're just gonna make a decision and then we'll make it right. So, you know what, when I was looking up some photos and I found these, it really made me take a second to really think, you know, how was my life back then? You know, was I living a happy life, or was I pretending to live a happy life? And here's what I came up with. Essentially, I was trying to live a Ferrari life with a Mitsubishi mindset, and I was wondering why I wasn't happy. So over time, what I really had to do was raise my standards. And when we talk about standards, you know, the first thing that you think about is monetary stuff, Ferraris, diamonds, et cetera, but really what I want to drive home, pun intended, today, is that standards is about self-respect. And I think over time, we allow self-respect to just go lower, lower, lower. So no matter what standards you have when you walked in through those doors 10 minutes ago, that doesn't matter. What matters is what you want your standards to be from this very moment in time to move forward. So it doesn't matter if your standards have been set from someone else, maybe mom, dad, ex-partner, whatever the case may be. What matters is, what do you want to do with your life from this point forward? Because I'll tell you, without a shadow of a doubt, most of my clients and myself, we always put our standards lower than we can actually achieve. And we do this to protect ourselves from the fear of failure. So one of the many things I want you guys to take home today is learning to how to raise your standards, because over time, the more you do so, the less you'll be disappointed when things don't work out, because it does one thing. It reminds you that you should have self-respect. When I was in my master's, this was again when I was dealing with a very severe eating disorder and major depression. I was just starting out in my post-grad, and I felt I do not belong here, because everyone else around me knew all the answers. They were super smart. So once a month, the entire department would get together and listen to a student present their findings, right? I'm gonna ask a really smart question. You know, like those smart people questions? I was like, I'm gonna ask one of those. And that's gonna prove that I belong here, that I deserve to be here. I asked a question, and in my head I was thinking, this is when, you know in the movies, when they all turn and they stand up and they do the slow clap? And they're like, wow, she's smart. She's gonna win a Nobel Prize. In my head, that's what was gonna happen, but when something like this, asked it, and Sergio's face went, and then everyone turned around, including a fly. I swear, there was a fly in the wall that even looked at me funny. They're like, what? Oh, it got worse though. So my supervisor was a couple of aisles down, and he was shaking his head. He turned back to the front, crossed his legs, you know it's gonna get really bad, put his head in his hand and just started shaking his head. I was mortified. I felt like just curling up, because I didn't realize that other people felt exactly the same way. They were like, why am I here? Someone's gonna take away my scholarship. I'm stupid, I don't belong here. And I didn't realize I could actually say, I'm struggling. I have no idea what you're talking about at all. I had no idea I could do that, because I had to put this front, I had to keep this mask on. As a scholarship winner, you know, you're sort of put up, oh, you always have to know the right answer, you always have to know that. It's not true. So remember, in these years, be you while becoming you. You're not gonna be the smartest person in the room, but that doesn't mean you can't contribute and you can't ask questions.
And that's the thing that we have to do. It's almost like neural feedback. It's an opportunity to learn, but the problem is when it's in a social context, we take it in as, oh, there's something wrong with us. But it's actually the best thing. It's what your brain wants. It wants to be challenged, because if it's not challenged, guess what? We wouldn't grow. And I mean this from a literal sense. Our brain would not develop.
And the more I struggled with this internal battle, the more I tried to appear just normal on the outside in front of my friends and family. I was this scholarship-winning A+ student, but behind closed doors, I was a crumbling mess, just trying to hold on. But here's the thing, and why I'm so glad I went through this experience. Sometimes you need to lose everything in your life before you figure out what's really important to hang on to.